So what do you do when you wake up the day after you've been eliminated from the playoffs? I don't have the first idea. I've never been eliminated from the playoffs. Only won the World Series. So I guess it's the same thing because been eliminated from playoff contention, but that was during the regular season, sometimes in July, sometimes in September, but sometimes in July. What are the Marlins doing right now? It's an interesting conversation because when you wake up after the type of season they've had, where you've been going on adrenaline, you had the outbreak, you made 150 roster moves plus, you've been on the road traveling inside the playoff bubble, you had the amazing feeling of clinching the playoffs, the amazing feeling of celebrating beating the Cubs, the feeling that you're in the series with Atlanta. Even after losing a game, you feel like you can come back. Even after losing 2 games, you have Sixto Sanchez, your real ace, even though he's young on the mound. You feel like you're going to come back. You've got adrenaline flowing. You wake up and all of a sudden you have this void. I remember that's the feeling I would have the day after the regular season would end, or in 03, the day after the World Series. You have this feeling like, okay, now what? What do I do? My routine of a game every day, my routine of hoping that we are heading towards something, it's done. How much time do I take before I have to start preparing for 2021 or for the next season? And some people take a week, some players take a month. Generally, my off season lasted about an hour because you're starting to plan next season from a business standpoint and from a baseball standpoint immediately. What the Marlins are going to do is something that I had to do every year for 18 years. I had to check my delusion at the door. When you go into a season, there's not one season out of 18 that I went into that I didn't think that we had a chance, if everything fell right, to compete for and the World Series and make the playoffs. Whether it was true or not, there wasn't one first workout in spring training where I looked and said, this team sucks. Even 2006, after we had traded away so many players from 2005 when we should have made the playoffs and didn't, we had Joe Girardi. We had a bunch of young players who had never been proven, but we thought Dan Uggla could be good. We knew Hanley Ramirez was going to be good. We had great young pitching. Remember Ricky Nolasco and Scott Olson, Josh Johnson, bunch of players, Anibal Sanchez. You go in being told you're going to lose a hundo and feeling like you can win a hundo. The Marlins went into this season feeling like they had to take a step forward. And they did take a step forward because they won 31 of their first 60 games. They did take a step forward because they qualified for the postseason. Whether it was expanded playoffs or not, the postseason drought ended. But you have to look at yourself now, if you're the Marlins, and have a very tough conversation. They were in the middle of a rebuild. And what Derek Jeter has been saying is that I'm not a patient man. I want to win. I want to win now. And by making the playoffs this year, his view has been, we have proven you all wrong. They have been running around to local media here in Florida saying, why aren't you paying more attention? Why aren't you realizing how good a season we had? Why aren't you focused and giving more news coverage and more column inches to the great job we've done since that crappy old regime and all the crap they left us with? So offensive, it's a joke. We have rebuilt the farm system. We have gotten players in, and look, we made the playoffs. You're right. They did all those things. Would they have made the playoffs in a 162-game season? We'll never know, so the narrative gets to be, yes, they would have. They get to say that. So what do you do now? You pick up Starling Marte's option, $12.5 million. You do that for sure. You know your offense was no better than you thought it would be, even though you brought in Dickerson, signed him to a 2-year deal. Jesus Aguilar. You've got great young players. I do know that. But are they great enough? Are there any Ronald Acuñas? Are there any Juan Sotos? Are there any players you can build around? Is it Brian Anderson? Is it Jazz Chisholm? Is it Garrett Cooper? Because it's not Miguel Rojas. He's their spiritual leader. You don't build a championship team around Miguel Rojas. It's really hard once you've tasted this success to dismiss it as variable. and variable may very well be what it was. And that's not to take away from it. This is not an anti-Marlins rant. This is a sympathetic rant. It's not even a rant. It's a sympathetic voice. Because how do you know? Do you ask your owner, if you are Mike Hill, who, by the way, his contract ends in 20 days, they better give him an extension. He deserves to be about the 5th or 6th highest general manager. He's got more experience, and he's shown that he can move money when he needs to. He doesn't need me to be his agent or his mouthpiece. It'll be very interesting to see. Mattingly was manager of the year. They gave him a pay cut last year to this year. What are they going to do? What are they going to do with Mike Hill? What do? Do you go to your do you go to your owner and say, we got to raise payroll? We need to bring in some real offense here. We need to trade some pitching to get offense to complement Marte. He can't be our only offensive weapon. Or do you say, what a great season. We had a chance. We made the playoffs. We started to reverse the narrative, but we've got to stay the course. It's hard to stay the course. Remember when the Chicago Cubs were rebuilding and they lost so many games as part of the rebuild before they won the World Series in 2016? And they were losing 100 games multiple times, sort of like the Astros. The Astros, before they became good, had a 3-year span where they lost 100 games in a row. Well, the owner of the Cubs was so annoyed by all the losing that he mandated the signing of a pitcher named Edwin Jackson to a long-term deal in Chicago. And it was a head scratcher because it didn't fit the rebuild. The Cubs weren't ready, and it turned out to be a disastrous signing. But the GM did it because it was Theo, I believe. He did it because when the owner says, hey, I'm giving you the money, you got to do this. Owners get impatient during rebuilds. Owners get impatient during seasons when there's winning because they want to win more. They get impatient when they don't get a ring because they want a ring. They get impatient when they win a ring because they want to win another ring. And the job of the front office is to quash that impatience and to shower it with a dose of reality. I'm not sure Jeter has what it takes to do that with Bruce Sherman. I think that Bruce Sherman will need to be fiscally responsible. And Bruce Sherman, the owner of the Marlins, will realize that the amount of financial benefit that has been gained by this playoff run is so de minimis that it will not cut into the annual losses of the team enough to warrant any sort of payroll increase. There's so much concern about next season and next season's revenues that I think the Marlins will be able to hide behind that and not increase the payroll and not do anything to say that we are advancing our rebuild. And you know what? That will benefit them. By being able to not make bad signings because of money, you end up not making bad signings because of evaluation. What do I mean by that concept? I compliment the Tampa Rays all the time for trading their players before they need to. It's always better to trade a player a year too early than a year too late. I compliment them because they don't go after the huge free agents. They did it once in their franchise history when Vince Namoli, the old owner, rest in peace, signed. Remember when he signed Fred McGriff and Jose Canseco and Wade Boggs and did all that stuff, and it didn't add up to anything. What the Rays do now is they've got players who they're about to be in the LCS, and people can't name 5 people on that team. The fans cannot literally name 5 players on that team. When you don't have the money, because Tampa has no revenue, terrible TV deal, terrible attendance, terrible everything. You can't make the type of mistakes that are made by teams who have the ability to make those mistakes. It's an interesting thing. When the Marlins acted like a large revenue team and signed players to big long-term deals, they didn't work out because we weren't in a market that was able to sustain. And in addition, it's hard to sign long-term deals that work. The majority of long-term deals simply don't. So if you can't sign them to begin with, then you can't get hurt, which makes what the Dodgers are doing that much more interesting to me. Until Mookie Betts, Andrew Friedman winning all those divisions, No free agent signings over $55 million. And by the way, Mookie Betts was not a free agent signing. He was an extension. They had already traded for him. He was under contract. So I could still tell you that they have no true free agent signings over $55 million. The Dodgers with a $200 million payroll certainly could do it, but they don't. They act like Andrew, and Andrew acts like he's still in Tampa, where he came from. That's what makes them so successful, to have a small revenue mentality with a big revenue team. Now, don't get me wrong. Andrew Friedman waves his money around, takes advantage of small revenue teams by offering them money for their draft picks, offering them money to get international slot money from teams. So he uses the power of the dollar to improve his team without getting stuck with horrific long-term deals. It is a very interesting way that the Dodgers do business, and how the Marlins will do business this offseason is going to be interesting. How the Reds and other teams who made the expanded playoffs but weren't good enough, even the Padres, what will these teams do going into 2021? This offseason is going to be far more interesting than last offseason, because last offseason was a regular offseason. There was no COVID. There was no thought of COVID. I guess it had started in China maybe a little bit during the offseason, but no one thought what would happen would happen. But this offseason, there are two factors in baseball that are that we'll talk about for the next few months. One, the collective bargaining agreement expires after 2021. And two, there is no way to know what's going to be with COVID. If you're a free agent player, we said it on Nothing Personal, be like Yuri Gurriel. Take the 1-year deal, take the 20% cut, and run.